Hey YouTube, Simon Dixon here, and today I'd like to give a message on those that are protesting in El Salvador against Bitcoin. I'd like to share with everybody that doesn't know what it's about, and I'd like to share a message to those that are protesting in El Salvador around why you might want to consider Bitcoin and some of the risks and things that you might be protesting against. So I noticed a huge uptick since I gave commentary on El Salvador and announced that the importance of the Bitcoin Volcano Bond to launch Bitcoin City in El Salvador. And I noticed, I do read many of the comments. I don't have time to reply. Every now and then I jump in and reply. But I noticed a big uptick from people in El Salvador sharing what it means for them and their country. So I'd like to address that directly. So for the quick background, El Salvador announced Bitcoin as legal tender. What is legal tender? It means that it can be accepted as a country's national currency, and laws are written, which means that it can be used for the payment of tax, and it can be accepted alongside the dollar, which is the main currency that El Salvador was using before this shift and focus into Bitcoin. They also announced the issuance of a Bitcoin bond in order to invest in Bitcoin City and build out infrastructure, and half the proceeds will be used in order to purchase Bitcoin to reinvent the debt capital markets and issue a bond based upon some of the work that Bank to the Future did way back in 2014 when we first issued to investors a Bitcoin bond. My message to you is that your government, led by an entrepreneurial spirit of taking a bet on the future of Bitcoin, which historically there's no guarantee that the past equals the future, has been one of the highest returning bets in history. So over the last 13 years, Bitcoin has been the highest performing asset in history. And what your government is doing is trying something that every individual, every business, and every government in the world should or may implement. So I understand that the protests, and if I've misunderstood something about the protests, then please leave a comment below this video to educate me and help me understand more about your concerns. But the protests, from my understanding, boils down to that money, when people in El Salvador are living, month to month, and people that are living below the poverty line, they are scared by the instability that this could cause to their country, firstly. Secondly, the volatility in the price of Bitcoin relative to fiat currency could mean that you end up receiving payments, the value going down short term, which could create more poverty and more volatility in managing your personal expenses. The third thing, I believe, is that there's so much things that need building out in El Salvador that it feels like, rather than investing in healthcare, infrastructure, and the things that the people need, and the El Salvadorian people, then purchasing Bitcoin as a speculative vehicle feels like some kind of, a speculative attack upon the El Salvadorian people. Now, please do tell me if I've got that wrong and there's more to it. Please use the comments. I'm completely open. And in future videos, I'd love to address those comments as well. But I'd like to share with you some personal experiences. Now, I understand that I am not somebody in El Salvador experiencing the same things that you're experiencing. I'm here in my personal gym, having achieved all the wealth that I could ever imagine, more than I can imagine, and it may be hard to relate. But it wasn't so long ago, maybe over a decade ago, that I was approximately £100,000 in debt. That's about $150,000, $125,000, $130,000 in debt. Trying to create a bank with no idea how I would pay the next month. And the experience of that, while, I was in a situation of trying to pursue an entrepreneurial venture and change the future of finance, I was to some degree in a situation where I was deep in debt, and I really didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and just focused on a vision to try and create some value so that eventually that would take care of itself. But I had to do what everybody has to do when they're deep in debt one day. You either bury your head in the sand and end up in financial ruin or financial dependency upon a government or financial bankruptcy, or you try and turn your situation around. I chose to try and turn my situation around, and I had to really just implement some sound principles that very few governments, as your leaders, are showing by example. In order to get out of debt, in order to change your financial future, you have to get yourself in a position where you spend less than you earn and you invest the difference. And you pay yourself first and invest it in assets. Now, when you are on the poverty line, it's next to impossible to appreciate and understand how that is possible, because you're so busy living month to month, and you may be in a country where opportunities are very few and far between. I'd like to address both of those. So firstly, when I was £100,000 in debt, I decided to implement some principles, and that was, I gave myself a simple challenge, and that was to each month have more Bitcoin than I had the prior month. And no matter how small it was, I decided that every time I generated some income, I would spend less than that income, and I would use that to accumulate some Bitcoin. And the point with that Bitcoin was that it was always going to be left, never touched. Later I developed the whole retirement plan B principle about how to diverse and add more safety, but that was my simple things. I set myself some basic principles. Each month I want more Bitcoin than I had the previous month, and where will I fund that? Every time I generate income, I will spend slightly less than I earn and ensure that I invest the difference in an asset. I decided that I wasn't going to pay my debt. I decided that the letters were going to come through, and eventually I would reach a stage where I could pay that debt. Now, I'm not saying that's the best strategy for you. I'm just saying it's the strategy that I followed. And the concept of paying myself first was, no matter what, no matter who was asking for money, no matter what was happening in my life, I was going to contribute to building assets, and I was going to leave it, and that money was not mine. It was, it was savings on the side. And no matter what happens in my life, the, dipping into that pot was not. So it was a psychological shift to savings rather than paying off debt. That shift completely transformed my life forever. Just by following that principle over the last decade, it put me in a financial position that I couldn't ever dream of. And so most people completely underestimate what they can achieve in 5 to 10 years and overestimate or completely get despondent for what they could do in the next year. And so what El Salvador, what your government is doing right now, is they are implementing that same principle to their own national debt. Your government has two choices from here. One, they have three choices. One, they can end up in the complete power of foreign central banks by using the International Monetary Fund and bonds issued at the World Bank level, or by foreign investment in US dollar denominated bonds, and just recycle its debt forever. If they recycle your debt forever, it's okay for the US, who has control of the most important currency in the world, the dollar, and they can print it and control it. But if you don't have control over that dollar and you take on dollar denominated debt, then you are the whims of foreign central banks and you lose a massive degree of sovereignty in your country, especially when you get into bed with the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and tied loans, where they end up creating the money through the magic and wizardry of banking, and then lend it to your government, and then you end up spending it in a foreign country and you're riddled with the debt in a currency that you don't control and an unstoppable. So the El Salvadorian government has $17 billion of such debt. Your president has decided to follow the same thing that every individual should do, every business should do, every government should do, and every central bank should do. And that is that they need to implement sound principles of spending less than they earn, investing the difference so that they can generate a wealth effect that later can be used to pay down their debt and invest and make investments. But the challenge is that short term, those investments don't pay off. Now, remember what I said, most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 5 to 10 years. It's the same for governments. Politicians work on, if in your country you have a 4-year election cycle, everything is driven to the short term. So by increasing the electoral cycle, you get to invest and have a longer term thinking mindset. Now, if you know that you're going to be voted in and out in the next few years, then you only get to implement a 4-year cycle of investment, which often may not be enough to have the impact that you need. And so therefore, by having a 5 to 10 year cycle to invest and build an investment effect and a wealth effect, then you get to implement the spend less than you earn and invest the difference approach and strategy that could lead to investing in assets that then pay down the national debt. Now, in the short term, it's completely painful. In the short term, you're thinking about what the government could have been spending. I'm on the poverty line. I need this, but that only leads to more debt, a debt cycle, and the long-term impact of that is the complete destruction. And the book that I wrote, Bang to the Future, Protect Your Future Before Governments Go Bust. You having to protect yourself because your governments are going bust, and even worse, then reckless printing of their own currency, hyperinflation, and the complete destruction of all wealth of the middle class and and a very, very few rich people benefiting because they got on the right side of wealth inequality. And that is what we are seeing in other countries. So while it may be tempting to say there is an immediate need to spend on things that can get us out of the poverty line, some of that money needs to be allocated to investing in an alternative future. And that alternative future, the El Salvadorian government and an entrepreneurial president has said, the best opportunity out there, the highest reward relative to risk, is Bitcoin. And that worked exactly for me. That has worked for so many individuals that I know. It's worked for my company, banktothefuture.com, and it's worked for many other companies that I know as well. And now, for the very first time, we get to see this at the government level. You may not know this, but many governments have tried to do what your government has done, and they always get my government in the Isle of Man, they were the first country to try and do what El Salvador did. The regulators shut it down. The Bank of England got on the phone to them and said, we'll stop clearing to your banking system if you support Bitcoin. But El Salvador president didn't bow down like the Isle of Man government. The El Salvadorian started tweeting around the Bank of England's not concerns. And if you haven't watched my video from yesterday, then you can listen to what it means when the Bank of England is expressing concerns over this strategy. So my message is simple. If you have a message that you would like to share with me around your protests in Bitcoin, maybe someone from the community can take this video, put some Spanish subtitles, and help get this translated into something that more El Salvadorian people could understand. But if you could help me understand your protests, then I'd love to create commentary. I'm not a politician. I'm a financial commentator, and I'd love to just give you some perspectives on what that means. And as I said, I'm not saying that my situation is something that you can relate to, but if there's anything in my story that I was on the poverty line, I was £100,000 in debt, I was from a country where I was pursuing an entrepreneurial venture and I had freedom to pursue, but there was ginormous resistance from regulators and politicians and some of the most entrenched interests in the world when we were trying to build a bank. So I fully appreciate and understand some of those. My situation is not the same. It may not be relatable to you, but I just want to translate that this approach that I'm sharing is something that changed my life and has changed many other people's life. Spend less than you earn, invest the difference, have a long-term mindset, and think of a 5 to 10 year plan. The president of El Salvador has come up with an incredibly an incredible plan that no other government has done. And if this works, if the Bitcoin denominated bond, if the making Bitcoin legal tender works, El Salvador within the next 5 to 10 years, now the future does not equal the past, but if Bitcoin did what it did over the last 5 to 10 years, for the next 5 to 10 years, and I'm not saying that will happen, I've bet all my money on saying that will happen, and I have a risk-managed approach in order to do that. Then the El Salvador government could end up becoming one of the most powerful and inspiring free market countries in the world. And it could be really driving and ushering in a wealth effect unparalleled that we've only seen from transformational countries like China, for example. Now, China did it based upon the Communist Party and a different ideal. And therefore, that was based upon that. But this is a free market ideal being done at El Salvador from a government strategy that has shown a willingness and desire to stand up to the entrenched interests, to stand up for those that may not have the concern of the El Salvadorian people in mind, and try something different that could end up generating a wealth effect in your country that we've never seen before. And so another thing that I'd like to help you understand is that by investing in Bitcoin, they are delaying gratification. It rewards the saver. It is money that you can own, money that you can spend, and money that has a fixed supply. It is independent from central bankers. It means that eventually that wealth can be collateralized, where you can borrow currency like dollars that goes down in value historically over time, backed upon savings that historically over time have gone up in value. It's the same strategy that you as an El Salvadorian may one day get yourself in a position because your country generates a wealth effect that creates more opportunity. They are also investing in Bitcoin City in a move to try and bring more jobs and more opportunities. And to give you on a very small scale, at banktothefuture.com, we would love to hear from you. If you were in El Salvador and you would like a job, we've got technical jobs, we've got support jobs, we've got compliance jobs, we've got finance jobs, we've got HR jobs. We're looking to bring in 50 to 100 people over the next year or so. Go to banktothefuture.com/careers. And there are many companies just like us that are now thinking about, you are backing us in the Bitcoin community. We'd like to back you. We'd like to give your country jobs. People that work for Bank to the Future. We have retirement products. We have, very innovative plans. And so therefore, there are going to be more companies that are looking to bring these opportunities to you. When you get those roles, when you get that opportunity, spend less than you earn, invest in the difference, and have a 5 to 10 year mindset. And then you can break the cycle of the volatility. Bitcoin has its problems with volatility, but here's what it does, is it punishes the short-term thinker and rewards the long-term thinker. So whereas traditional currencies, the value of them go down over time, which means that you are incentivized to spend it as fast as possible because the value decreases over time. Bitcoin does the opposite. It encourages savings. It has encouraged a wealth effect. It rewards the long-term thinker historically. And while there is a great element of risk to that, what choice does El Salvador have? They either go to the whims of the IMF and the foreign banks and give away the sovereignty of their country, or they repackage debt after debt and go deeper and deeper into poverty and follow the largest wealth inequality gaps that we've seen in other countries. Or El Salvador says, enough is enough. We're going to do something different. We're going to invest in generating a wealth effect. We're going to invest in savings. We're going to invest in entrepreneurs and infrastructure that can give jobs, and we can break the line through markets. I personally believe that whatever your protests are against that, I understand that you may need support from the government, and it's a genuine thing that you need given your current circumstances, the politics in your country, whatever is happening. But you've got to appreciate that if the government starts operating as an individual does, spending less than they earn, investing in the difference, and investing into money, digital hard sound money, and assets that historically appreciate in value because of their fixed supply, El Salvador could potentially come back here in 5 to 10 years and be a force in the world that they never imagined. When I implemented that strategy, I had never imagined the wealth that could be generated from it. When my company, Bank to the Future, implemented that strategy, I never imagined the wealth that our company could generate from it. And ever since I've been asked to give advice to governments, I've been sharing with them the same strategy. And as many governments and as many places that I visited that all said, yeah, we want the jobs, the regulators and the central banks have always got in the way and taken it down. Malta tried to do it, but they're bespoke to the European Central Bank. Isle of Man tried to do it, but they're bespoke to the Bank of England. El Salvador is now doing it, and they said, screw the IMF, screw the Fed, screw the Bank of England. We're doing our own stuff, and we're backing it not upon the whims of central bankers, but upon maths and code, and maths and code that were designed where the monetary policy is fixed, understood, so that we can add more predictability long term, but we have to have the short term volatility. We have to think long term. Governments around the world need to need to increase interest rates. They can't do it because it will trigger a Great Depression all around the world. So they're stuck in implementing larger and larger governments, central bank digital currencies, and gradually shifting their economies away from free markets to socialism to communism. El Salvador is reversing the effect. They are going the opposite effect from communism to socialism to free markets. And in free markets, if you can generate that wealth effect, it may do exactly what everyone that I know that's become wealthy in Bitcoin does. Reinvesting, rebuilding, and rebuilding based upon savings rather than debt. And then implementing debt strategies like collateral, where they use pristine assets as collateral and then borrow in currencies that go down in value. Sorry if I've given you complete financial jargon, but this is my message to those protesting in El Salvador. If the community could figure out a way of getting this to as many people that are protesting, helping get this in Spanish or a language that more people can understand. My message is simple. If I've completely missed the boat and there's something that I don't understand about what you're protesting, leave it in the comments, educate me so I can comment and understand a bit more about it. But there are Bitcoin people, individuals and companies that are all looking at your country right now, which is over $1 trillion market. And your government is showing one of the most interesting and exciting strategies that the world has ever seen. And if I were from El Salvador, I'd be very proud to be involved in this. So protest against it, educate us on what the issues are, but please don't get on the wrong side of one of the largest changes in financial history. You are alive at one of the most interesting and exciting times in financial history. Many countries are going to be on the wrong side of this change. Others are going to be on the right side of this change. In El Salvador, your government has implemented an incredible strategy to be on the right side of that change. You, the El Salvadorian people, please get on the right side of that change too. Buck the trend, and I will see you. Peace, love, unity, and I'll see you for another message. I can't wait to read your comments, can't wait to see your role applications, and I can't wait to see you transform the finances of you as an individual, your country's businesses, and your country. Peace.